guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video I'm very excited about because I'm finally picking up book 2 to probably like one of the most popular sci-fi fantasy hybrid series out there. That's right friends, I'm finally reading Golden Son by Pierce Brown. This far and away has to be one of the most requested series that I get on my channel in terms of me checking it out and reading it. So I'm really looking forward to documenting my reading experience with you guys for book 2. I am going to be completely honest with what I feel about it though throughout this video. Full transparency, I read Red Rising, the first book in this trilogy, about this time last year, and I personally did not love it. I found it to just be okay. I gave it about a 2.753 stars. It wasn't bad. Aspects of it I did enjoy. The pacing in terms of the plotting of this book is really breakneck, so it was a really quick read for me, but I found the writing style, the characterization, and just some of the plot elements to be really lacking for me personally, especially just given how popular it is. But I also got so many comments telling me that Red Rising by far is apparently the weakest within this larger series. This series is a trilogy, but there's also now another series that's directly connected. I'm not sure if it went from a trilogy to like a 6-book series or if it's like a combination of 2 trilogies together, but nevertheless, this is kind of a hybrid sci-fi fantasy story set in the near future. Initially just set on Mars, we follow our main character Darrow, and he is a Red. This is an empire that's completely stratified by color. People are organized into certain jobs and social classes based on the color they're associated with. At the top of this hierarchy, there are golds. They're strong, they're fast, their bodies have literally been forged to be almost indestructible, and they're basically in charge of like anything and everything from the government to armies. They basically can do whatever they want and treat people however they want. At the end of this hierarchy, there are individuals called Reds, and they're basically forced to do really hard labor, and Darrow is a Red at the beginning of this story, and due to a variety of events, his life is sort of turned upside down, and he's transformed, and he gets involved in rebellion, and he's basically transformed into a gold so he can pass as a gold, and he starts attending this like university to get a really high placement amongst like the political elite within this society, yada yada yada. Book 1 gives like Roman competition academy vibes with just like a lot of quick world building and some not so great female characters and some not so great dialogue between characters. But again, I feel like there is a lot of potential in this world. Looking forward to continuing the story in Golden Son. I feel like it's at the very least going to be a quick read in terms of like not being able to put it down. So we shall see. So anyway, welcome to the start of this vlog. I'm finally reading Golden Son. I will be letting you know what I think and if I personally think it's worth the read or not. Maybe I'll start to like Darrow in book 2, TBD, because he was very vanilla in book 1. And you know, but everyone loved him, fear not. It's lunchtime, so we're making some adult Lunchables, which is a delicious, quick and easy option in this house. I have cheese, I have some veggies from last, oh, I have green onions. Celery, carrots, and my beloved, wait for it, can't say this sauce, which is so good. If you've never had it before, it's kind of like a ranch-esque sauce with like a little extra oomph, so it's good for dipping. And then I have peaches and apples. And so, you know, I'm just gonna chop up a bunch of stuff and get going. And lunch is served. Hello, it has reached the time of day that I'm going to spend some time reading, but I feel like to really fuel me through this book, I'm gonna have some coffee. But this is old coffee, so it needs to be reheated. So it goes. Let's do a reading update of Golden Son because I've read 80 pages, which is almost a quarter of the way of this book. And I'm happy to say I have quite a bit of thoughts and it's reading really quickly. Let's take a step back because I actually feel like I have a lot to talk about. So Red Rising, as I've already established, is this hybrid sci-fi-esque fantasy story, though I definitely feel like leaning much more sci-fi in this installment. Oh my god, what the that? What the what is that?
Reagan, what's going on?
A creature. I literally thought it was a scorpion, it was so big. I look closer. It's a roach. I screamed. I tried to get you. You were busy. I got the roach spray, but it's basically gone. I'm sorry. What was I even saying? So I think I was in the middle of saying that Golden Sun seems to be pivoting away from this sort of hybrid fantasy sci-fi situation to be more fully sci-fi. Particularly, I feel like Pierce Brown is setting up a world to kind of lean more into like a space opera situation. I feel like we're going to be shifting between lots of different planets. I feel like space is going to be much more involved than it had been previously. In the first book, we had sort of a sci-fi situation, but most of the settings and technology were really leaning into this sort of ancient Roman inspiration, even so much that the characterization in the dialogue, which, to be fully transparent, I hated how people were speaking in book one. It was so weird. Like, just the feeling of book one, though technically sci-fi, to me much more read like a fantasy novel in terms of like the setting and how the world worked. However, only 80 pages into book two, I would say this definitely feels a lot more sci-fi from the environment and how things are described and also some of the settings we've encountered, and I think it's working to the book's benefit. But to take a step back, I want to more clearly talk about Red Rising a bit, and also what I feel like has changed going into Golden Sun, both my feelings and just the plot in general. Because honestly, I would say I feel like Pierce Brown going into Golden Sun changed his mind in terms of what direction he wanted this plot to go into, and I think to the success of the author, he made the right move. And I feel like he spent the early part of this book sort of reshifting what direction he actually wants this plot and story to go, which is interesting because it kind of makes some aspects of book one irrelevant. But honestly, again, I don't mind because I feel like this new direction makes a lot more sense, and I feel like ultimately is going to be a lot stronger. But again, book one introduces us to our main character, Darrow, and there's definitely a lot of world building in that particular book, maybe a little info dumpy, but we're introduced to Darrow, we're introduced to kind of his origin story and given the big reason why he wants to go into being in a rebellion. Obviously, as a Red, he's the lowest level in this society. He's been treated terribly. The people he loves have been treated terribly, and sort of the curtain has been pulled back on their life and existence, kind of putting into stark reality the real powers at play here and the people at the top of society kind of taking advantage of everyone below them, but especially these sort of lower colors, which is why Darrow agrees to get involved in rebellion and why he agrees to have his body transformed into this sort of like golden individual. Book one, though, I feel like sort of pivots away from the concept of rebellion, and we sort of enter this school setting, which I didn't really enjoy that much in book one. And it was like a very detailed like exercise of people sort of vying for power within this school to sort of end up on top. Darrow as an individual wants to end up on top so he can have a very prestigious assignment, so he can sort of continue to work his way up the levels of society to sort of tear it apart from the inside out, or that is what we're told. To be honest, this aspect of book one wasn't necessarily my favorite. I found a lot of the characterization and the weird Roman dialogue to just like not really be for me. It was fine, I read it quickly, but that part of the book felt very repetitive. So it's interesting going into the next book, which is Golden Sun, because book one sort of set up that there was going to be another school setting, sort of like military academy, which we're going to follow Darrow at. But instead, going into book two, Pierce Brown has decided to do a time skip, meaning we skipped over that entire schooling, except for like a few scenes, which I actually really appreciated. And a lot of the like what we assumed would be the next steps based on the end of Red Rising, we've sort of sped through, and we're finding Darrow in kind of new situations that I feel like are a lot more interesting and kind of suit the world and concept much better. Darrow at the beginning of this book finds himself in a very perilous situation. He has a lot of enemies, and while he's a Gold, he's a very low-ranking Gold, so he doesn't have a lot of power, a lot of influence, a lot of friends, a lot of money to sort of maneuver through this world. And obviously he also wants to work alongside this rebellion who sort of put him in this position. And definitely I feel like in this book, rebellion is going to be center stage, and I'm curious to see how that's going to continue to develop. And I also feel like Darrow as our main character is going to be kind of stuck between multiple different interests and like morally what he feels like is right in terms of pursuing this rebellion. But I feel like it's going to be very action-packed. I feel like it's going to be very intense. And I'm hoping the writing and just the pacing of things is going to be better into book two. I've only read 80 pages, but some positives I would say so far relative to book one is that the dialogue is no longer super weird. It makes a lot more sense. It's a lot smoother. It's not that it's like mind-blowing, but it's no longer distracting me and it's sort of strangeness, if you know what I mean. I like the settings quite a bit. They feel clear. I feel like the context and world building that we got in book one is helping Pierce not kind of focus on info dumping, but instead having a more natural progression and explaining how the world works. Darrow feels like a much more natural main character. He's very talented, he has faults, but I find him to be, again, just a more normal character to follow within book two. I wouldn't say so far this is like the best thing I've ever read. I find the pacing to be quick and it's easy to read, and I definitely am like inclined to keep reading it and not put it down. I find still some of the interactions between Darrow and women, or just like women characters in this book, are like a little weird. Better than book one, but like book one, you know, the bar is on the floor. I'm gonna continue to hope that that improves and we just have like some better characters. I'm curious to see how Darrow is gonna navigate this complex web of influence, all of these corrupt individuals who kind of want power for themselves. And I feel like navigating a rebellion is also gonna be rather complicated. So I feel like there's lots of stuff here that could be interesting, but it's all just a matter of how it's put together. But what I have found most interesting so far was clearly the decision by the author to pivot the story from where he was initially going to go in book one. And it's kind of fun to see, and I think it's going to work much better and kind of gives me hope. So anyway, that's my first reading update and a little bit of a freak out and meltdown. But yeah, we'll keep reading. I'm gonna read more tonight. My friend's coming over. She just took a big test, so I'm gonna cook her dinner so we can relax. And I think I'm gonna do a little bit of puzzling in the meantime. I'm really sitting in such a weird spot right now. But that is my initial thoughts. Wish me luck. I got a lot of this book left to read. Millie, why are you sitting over here? Why are you sitting over there, you silly girl? She's like, teeth out. I'm smiling all the time. A puzzle to tone down my adrenaline rush post killing that bug. It's actually really cool. It's a circle, which I'm really enjoying. And it's also like color gradient, which is also really fun. I feel like I'm gonna really breeze through it, but I'm enjoying how I can organize the pieces so clearly by color. I don't know. It's soothing my brain in the best way. And dinner is served. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm up and dressed. I'm up and at 'em. And I've been reading Golden Sun. I didn't check in much last night because I was hanging out with my friend, but we're back in action. And I'm now officially into part 2. I'm on chapter 14, 130 pages. And I'm happy to report I am liking this book much more so far than Red Rising. All of the comments so far are very correct. I definitely see an improvement in a lot of aspects of the writing style, just the overall plotting, the characterization, all of these things in general are just working much better. I still wouldn't say so far at this point this is like one of the greatest things I've ever read, 5 out of 5 star read, but am I entertained? Am I curious what's gonna happen next? Yes. I'm also curious to see how the story is going to evolve, because as I sort of mentioned in my previous update, it definitely feels like the author's shifting gears a bit. So I'm just curious about the direction, and some things have been revealed and like I'm liking what I'm seeing. I like the drama and just the explosiveness of what has been revealed. And I think like I'm interested to see how things are going to play out. Something I have appreciated in this book too, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it in my previous update, but there has actually been a time skip between books 1 and 2, which I also like for a variety of reasons. One, I think it allows there to be a little bit of a reset between the emotions between characters in terms of when we left them at the end of book 1. It also allows Darrow to be a little bit older. It's interesting because like this was definitely written during a time of like a specific dystopian-esque trend. So like Darrow was like 16, 17 in the first one, which is kind of bananas. Now he's like 20, and I'm curious if throughout the series, if he's going to continue to get older. And I hope so. I think that would be like an interesting element to continue to allow time to pass. I think the side characters in this book are much more, they just feel much more real. And I think again, it has a lot to do with the dialogue is no longer this sort of like super formal Roman-esque stylization, and I think instead like feels a lot more natural between characters, which allows like real like emotion to pass back and forth. And I'm curious if there's going to be side characters I begin to enjoy and feel like connected to from a stakes point of view. Because I would say in book one, there was a lot of action that happened and there was technical stakes. Like not every character made it, if you will, but I wouldn't necessarily say I felt like super connected to anyone in book one, even like Darrow, our main character. So I'm hoping that continues to shift and change in this book. I'll say characters are more interesting in this, but like it remains to be seen like how connected I feel to like the entire cast. Story is still interesting, which I would say is definitely Pierce Brown's like strong suit. He's good at writing a plot. He's good at writing like end chapter cliffhangers, which definitely like propels you through the story and like wants you to keep reading. I love when I get to an end of like a beat or a scene and like the last sentence like hooks me and I feel like I immediately need to start reading the next chapter, and I feel like Pierce Brown does that quite well here. I also like his chapter lengths. I also feel like it's like really good pacing in terms of like keeping me wanting to read. They're like long enough to obviously clearly define the scene and the point that he's trying to make and whatever like plot movement we're in, but they're short enough where you're like, you just feel like you're constantly making progress, which as like a reader, I like. Then I think just speaks well to his overall story pacing, which I feel like has improved quite a bit. I'm curious to see how things are going to continue to evolve and change, like what direction this rebellion is going to take and what involvement Darrow is going to have. Obviously, he wants to overthrow this society, but as he is a gold, he has connections with other golds, and so I'm curious to see like how he's going to approach that. And we're beginning to see the beginning blueprint of his plans, and I just am curious to see like how this is going to continue to escalate. One thing I will say, all of the names in this series blend together, and I find it a little bit difficult to keep characters like track all the different characters in the story. Everyone has, all the golds have these sort of like Roman-esque names, and they definitely blend together, and there's like a lot of terminology that's used where I'm like, okay, wait, who is this again? Who are they connected to? Like, what family are they related to? And I feel like because there's all of these families that have all of these different like formal roles, and there's a lot of people in these families, like I won't lie, it's a little bit hard to keep track of everyone because everyone's names are not very distinct and they often sound similar to one another, like Claudia, Cassius, Claudius. Like it's like there's like 15 versions of the same name. I'm like, who are you again? I don't remember you at all. But yeah, so far so good. It's definitely starting to heat up. It's definitely an easy read in terms of like, ooh, I want to know what's gonna happen next. I've heard this only gets better, so I'll continue to keep you updated, but definitely happy to report I feel like this is definitely an improvement from book one in a variety of different avenues, so we will continue to see if it keeps getting better. Okay. It's getting gloomy outside. It was also very windy, like 0.5 seconds ago, and then I started vlogging and it stopped. So it's giving summer rainstorm vibes. Oh, there's the wind, it's picking up. There's nothing quite like a sudden and severe storm that you get in Texas. It'd be random, but obviously I grew up in North Texas, and so when I moved away, I assumed that everyone just got sudden and incredibly intense storms because I grew up with them, like lightning, thunder, shake your whole house. Maybe there's a tornado, like energy. This is when I moved to Chicago and the Northeast. Like, yes, sometimes they got intense storms, but like not nearly the same. Like almost every rainstorm in Texas, for the most part, has the chance, if not always, is very intense versus it's kind of the opposite. If you have a very intense storm, it's like unusual. So that was something I oddly was very nostalgic and missed when I moved away for a while because, you know, I love an intense rainstorm. Though now I feel like I get a lot more stressed out about it because Austin used to not get hail very regularly. I got it a lot growing up, but down here you didn't used to get hail very much. But now you get hail, and now that I have to pay for a roof if it breaks, it's a little more stressful. Anyway, this is a ramble. I'm gonna have some coffee and I'm gonna sit down and read. And I also think I'm pushing up cooking responsibilities tonight and getting my hyperfixation sandwich, but TBD on that. A little life update. I've read to page 170 of Golden Sun, and I completed like 2/3 of this puzzle. I have just been loving this puzzle. I'm actually doing this for a partnership. This is not sponsored at all. I just wanted to be fully transparent, but I have been having a blast. I haven't done a circular puzzle before, and their color gradient, I don't know, I'm having such a good time. So anyway, 2/3 done with that. Almost halfway done with this, you know, we're doing it, we're doing it. You guys already know. You already know it's like my baby. Heard it here first. I'm just kidding. Hi, it is well into the evening. In fact, it's like 7:30 at night. I have not checked in. I did do a little bit of reading this morning, but it's sort of been a day. Just to complain for a second, I tried a new lip product, gave me an allergic reaction, so things aren't going great. And then I burned dinner. I'm wearing an apron because I was like, time to cook dinner. Burned it. It's all burned. And you know, I could have just like started cooking it again, but at that point, I just felt like I decided to take the L and I ordered chicken nuggets to be delivered at my house. And sometimes it'd be like that. But anyway, I am gonna sit down on the couch while I wait for my chicken nuggets to be delivered and watch Survivor, but I did want to give you an update on Golden Son. I'm done complaining now, I promise. So, pacing of this book continues to be quite good, and that it's quite fast-paced, and I do feel like the action sequences are a lot more varied and interesting than what we got in Red Rising, and also, again, a lot more sci-fi forward in terms of how the action is played out. There are also these things called, like, razors that are kind of like, and I think those sequences in particular are pretty interesting, but there's also technology added into the mix too, from mech suits to other types of weapons that are being utilized, and we're also seeing Darrow interact finally with other colors and how they sort of work within society, which I'm also liking. Just in general, the world feels a lot bigger in the sequel than it did the first one. I still wouldn't say this is a perfect book. One thing that is driving me a little crazy, I like Darrow more than book one, but all these ladies are like obsessed with him, and he's constantly like, I can't, ladies, I can't. I might have feelings for you. You're so pretty, but I cannot. Stuck between Victra and Mustang, who I like both of these characters. Even at times, I feel like the fact that they are written by a man definitely rears their head. In particular with Victra, she's supposed to be like this not like other girls character. Like, she's described when she's first put on page to be like, she doesn't wear makeup, but she's got a sensuous mouth. And I'm like, okay. Basically, she's hot, okay? She doesn't need makeup. But the point is, all these ladies are obsessed with Darrow, and Darrow's like, what's the word I'm looking for? The sort of like romantic subplot line of this book just like really isn't compelling to me, especially because so much of the story's motivation is rooted in Darrow's wife. And so I just feel, I don't know, maybe I feel like way too loyal to Darrow's wife, where I'm like, any romantic subplot line, I'm like, it's too soon, guys. It's just way too soon. And I wish there were some female characters that could just be like friends with Darrow, and not because he first declined them romantically and so therefore they became friends, you know? But that's just, maybe that's a crazy idea. Anyway, I'm feeling a little spicy right now, so I'm gonna go watch TV and put some Vaseline on my lips and eat some chicken nuggets. Goodbye. Hello, good morning. But I have been reading. I have read to page 300 of Golden Son, and I wanted to do a reading update. Overall, I would say I'm definitely liking this book more than Red Rising. Obviously, the benchmark of liking it more than I gave Red Rising like 2 stars, so I really didn't like it. But I would say with my full chest that this is definitely better and overall like a much more enjoyable read. But I still wouldn't say it's like perfect for me so far. One thing I will say is that the action of this book has definitely escalated quite a bit, and the stakes of the conflict is much more significant than book one. Book one was kind of like an isolated student versus student, kind of an individual pursuit of power to be in position to be able to take on the sort of political structure of this unjust world. And in this book, we were introduced first to a rebellion, but now kind of Darrow taking on and trying to create this sort of war situation. We've basically been in a state of war for most of this book. Scrimmages, battles have been sort of happening, and I would say every chapter reads quickly, and the scrimmages are like clear in my head as I'm reading them, but I will say the infrastructure of the conflict and the purpose of the conflict doesn't necessarily feel fully formed to me. There are some scenes that sort of fill out the background to the red rebel groups that have been sort of introduced in this world, but it's not like a lot. And then there's also been conflicts between kind of clear power players in this universe that feels a lot more fleshed out than say some other things, but at the same time I feel like the progress of this conflict is like moving really, really quickly. So while it reads fast and it's entertaining and I like that aspect, I do feel like it doesn't give me a lot of time to sit with sort of the intensity and emotional fallout of like various combat scenes. So it's both a plus and a minus. A plus is this book is reading very fast and there's lots of action sequences to absorb, and like the conflict itself is sort of ballooning quickly, like very, very quickly, and we're watching Darrow have to think on his feet, gain allies, you see him work with his friends. But on the negative side of that, because it's moving so quickly, it's almost kind of hard to keep up, and I'm not sure if I'm grasping, or I feel like I'm able to grasp like the full scale of this conflict and the intensity and the loss and the fear of this conflict, if that makes sense. Like, it's entertaining, but I still don't know if it's like developed enough for me personally. And then the part of this book that I actually feel like is the weakest, because I am much more entertained by this plot, and I feel like the plot is actually much better than book one, and the writing style is much better than book one, is Darrow and his friendships. I don't know what it is, but I just like am having a hard time fully buying into the relationships of this series. It's just like so beloved so quickly by everyone, and he's like, I don't know, everyone sort of wants to be his friend or his enemy. Everyone either hates him or like wants to like get with him romantically or via friendship. And while I love, you know, focusing and having friendship centered in stories, I just don't know if I feel the stakes of this relationship, of the relationship in this book as much as I should feel, especially because there has been some like emotional scenes at play. So it's interesting. Like, I'm liking this book, I'm reading it quickly, I definitely want to know what's going to happen next. I don't necessarily know what direction Pierce Brown is going with the plot, and I feel like he's going to continue to surprise me, and the sort of maneuvering of this plot and the combat is very cool, very sci-fi focused, and like all of that I like. So like definitely positive there. I feel like there have been improvements in the character writing, but I'm still feeling a bit of a distance and just like a lack of believability between characters' relationships. Like, I feel like he's writing them to be emotional, but it's just like not clicking for me personally as a reader. It'll be interesting to see how this story continues to evolve, because it's definitely trying to center this sort of rebellion of the classes. And right now it's still very gold-centric, gold versus golds. And I'm assuming the structure is going to continue to break down. It would be cool if this series sort of shifted from being just Darrow focused to more perspectives. I feel like it would allow us to be in more places and also have more clarity and first person experience with other colors and how they're working within this society. Because obviously Darrow has experience of being a red, and he is around gold and now is kind of living as a gold. We get glimpses of other colors and their perspectives and their jobs within this world, but it's obviously going to be limited because of Darrow's position within this society. So I doubt we'll get multi-POV, but like maybe in the next trilogy we'll get multi-POV. I just like, the thing is, I think what the issue is I like Darrow, I'm rooting for Darrow, but it isn't necessarily like my favorite Chosen One-esque character that I've ever read before in the past. But he's not bad by any means. I just feel like there's an emotional core of this story that really could be here because of the topics, but I don't necessarily feel like it's been fully developed as much as like the action plot lines of this book, which are rather entertaining. I just feel like more time could be spent on all elements to sort of add more nuance and layers to everything. But like, there is a lot of good here, and it's definitely an improvement so far. I still find it difficult to track all the different names in this world, I won't lie, but it is getting a bit easier. But anywho, it's a lot about friendship. And I just don't know how much I believe the friendships, you know? It's lunchtime, folks, and I'm making a Caesar salad. I've already salad spun this. Used up all my lettuce. Look at that. No grocery waste. And then I have a Caesar dressing that I made earlier this week that I'm gonna use the rest of as well. I browned up some breadcrumbs. I like to do this instead of using croutons because I like to have an entire, like I want my whole salad to be like crouton. To use breadcrumbs, it coats the whole thing versus only having a couple bread, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Crouton bites. I'm pro breadcrumb in here. And I'm also cooking up some chicken. Look at that. Caesar salad incoming. All Alrighty, Caesar salad with a pan-seared chicken thigh is served. Millie and I are about to do what we do best, which is watch reality TV and eat a tasty snack. Dinner is a hodgepodge of things, including boxed mac and cheese. But we're gonna go eat this and probably go watch some TV. Dude, I love being home. It's just me and Daro now. Trying to read as much as I can before I fall asleep. Luckily, this book is so plot forward, so much action. It's a good one that can actually, that it's hard to fall asleep, despite the fact that basically nowadays, anytime I start reading at night, I immediately am like, but there's a lot of stuff happening here that is keeping my attention. It's keeping my attention, I promise. Hello, good morning. I wanted to do a reading update of Golden Son because I only have about 70 pages of this book left. And I wanted a reading update now, and then obviously another reading update like when I finally get to the final sequence of this book. A lot of people talk about the ending of this book in particular, so I want to like save time and kind of give you my thoughts and feelings about how I'm feeling about this installment before I read the end. You know what I mean, boyo? So overall, I feel like my thoughts and feelings about this book are consistent. I definitely feel like there has been an overall improvement, particularly with the plotting and the action sequences. This is definitely a series that's not really allowing you to relax. It's kind of action sequence after action sequence after action sequence. Like, therefore, this has both pluses and minuses. The plus is that the book reads really quickly and it's very entertaining. And as I mentioned, the combat writing is pretty successful, Space Invaders-esque. A downside is Pierce Brown likes to do a lot of unexpected plot twists, and some of them land and I'm like, dang, okay, let's see where this is going. And some of them, while interesting, might not have like the emotional impact I feel like they could, because I don't necessarily feel super connected to some of the characters, especially some of the side characters, and their motivations aren't necessarily clear to me, so it feels a little muddled. Like, it's supposed to be this big dramatic moment, but because the character doesn't feel like whole to me, it is interesting but not necessarily like super impactful, if you know what I mean. Aspects of this plot too I am liking. I feel like the beginning has actually been stronger than the middle. Obviously we're following Daro, who is sort of waging this secret rebellion as a red, hiding amongst the golds. He can't tell anyone, he really can't trust anyone, because fundamentally he is like the opposition to these people. And seeing him at the beginning of this book kind of on his back foot, trying to maneuver and figure out what in the world he's going to do next in terms of either working with a certain faction of the rebellion or like kind of taking his own path, if you will, to figure out how he can bring about the change that he so desperately feels like this world needs, was interesting. And there's a lot of political intrigue at the beginning, kind of like people with different power and motivations, and people sort of combating against each other in a variety of ways, either through direct combat or through like manipulation in like a courtroom setting. And that I liked. And I feel like he did a good job setting up this plot, which is kind of like unrest to all-out war, civil war, kind of starting in this book. I will say I think some aspects of the conflict do feel really accelerated, and we sort of left a lot of the politicking behind in the first part of the book. We've just been war-centric in the second half, if not the last 50% of the book. And while that's entertaining, I feel like I'm missing some of the politics. And sometimes like concepts and politicking will just be revealed as kind of a plot twist, like, oh, we're here all along because of XYZ. I didn't tell you guys, you know what I mean? And it's to say that it's good, but some aspects of the plotting just feel rushed. Keeps the pacing good, but doesn't necessarily develop the book in like its full capacity, if you know what I mean. Daro, our main character. I struggled with Daro a lot in book one. I like him more in book two, but I just feel like something about his characterization is like missing for me. And this is probably just personal preference here. There's not necessarily an objective truth, but for me, Daro, I think his internal struggle is interesting. Obviously, Daro is struggling with the fact that he has so much on his shoulders. He has a huge burden. He has to like he has to hide in plain sight. He has to work to do this rebellion. Is he making his people proud? Is he doing right by where he comes from? But he's also like growing close and making friends and feeling emotions for other golds, and like that obviously conflicts with a lot of aspects of like who he is and what he feels like he should be doing. That's interesting, and I actually wish that was explored more. I think what I struggle with Daro in some ways is like not even his fault, because he's just so beloved and beloved quickly. He wins people over quickly. It's kind of like Naruto's Talk no Jutsu, but I feel like it happens fast. And I get that he's a chosen one, but it just, sometimes things just feel a little too convenient, like a little too lucky. Everything just always works out for Daro. People love Daro. And Daro's not a bad guy. In fact, I even like Daro, but there's just something about him that feels like a little too perfect within the narrative. Like, he always thinks of the best answer. He always thinks of the best strategy. He's the best in combat. He's the strongest, fastest, smartest. And like, aspects of him, I wish like maybe some parts of him weren't as perfect, and then they could slot in side characters better to sort of fill in the gaps, which would also make the side characters a little stronger. Because like, don't get me wrong, like Mustang, for example, one of the only female characters in this book, really good at strategy, and she does like echo that sometimes, but like Daro still thinks of like the best strategies, you know? I don't know. Maybe I'm just struggling because I just sometimes feel like Daro is like too perfect. But that being said, I am liking this book. I just think it's like solidly in the middle, or maybe like 3.75 stars for me at this point. So again, definitely improvement from book one, but I'm still sort of like waiting to have my mind blown, if that makes sense, or like to fully fall headfirst in love with the story. Like, I'm liking it, I'm entertained. I'll probably continue on because it's not like I'm like hating every aspect of this book, but this is like, has like a 4.41 on Goodreads, and I'm like, I want to be as obsessed with this book as everyone else. Obviously, I still have the end plot sequence, and I still see like a lot of potential within this, and I'm actually curious if I'm gonna like the second sequence of this series more, because like, I mean, Pierce Brown wrote Red Rising when he was like 20, so like, I just feel like there's going to be like growth within this story through time too. I feel like we got some good twists and turns left within this book, and one thing I feel like I could definitely count on in this book and this series is the plot is going to be something that's going to like deliver, and I feel like eventually I'm going to like these characters more than I do. This also wouldn't be the first time where I read a sci-fi series for the plot and kind of assumed the characters would grow on me with time. This also has happened with me with the Expanse series. It took like 3 books for me to fully feel like invested in the characters and really feel like I liked and understood them, and the authors really kind of found their footing with writing them for them not to feel like caricatures. And I'm thinking again with time, I think I could like the characters in this series more, for them to feel like less shallow and more fully realized, less like the sidekick banter characters that sort of like fill a role and actually feel like living, breathing people in the story and narrative. I'm curious to see how this whole thing is going to wrap up. People have talked a lot about this book in particular, so I'm just gonna keep going. And I just wish there was a little more, I do wish there was a little more politicking, you know? I like war, but like, give me some of the stuff between the war more fleshed out. You know what I mean? I feel like we're constantly just watching like battles and strategies kind of unfold, which matches like the Roman-esque inspo, but I feel like it could be a little more balanced. But I'm gonna go sit down now and finish this book, so wish me luck. Daro is having a hard time at the moment. I'm dressed like a picnic blanket, but truly the home stretch of this book, things are definitely getting wild in terms of like this final sequence. Big reveals, lots of reveals. Actually one was quite good. I was like, oh. So Pierce Brown, I've complained about his reveals. Some of them don't work, but he does a lot of them. So like, he's covering his bases. Some of them work quite well, some of them don't. I feel like now I'm kind of in the calm before the storm again. Like, I feel like he's like leading me to a false like feeling of peace, but we'll see. I think I'm gonna make lunch before I actually finish this book, and then so I can have a full belly while I process whatever the heck he's about to do in this. I sort of panicked what to make for lunch, so I sort of just made dinner instead for lunch. So I have 2 ears of corn, which I roasted in the oven. I mashed up some black beans, and then I also cooked some chicken thighs and some sweet potatoes. Should be delicious. I'll figure out what to make for dinner later. That is future Reagan's problem, not lunch Reagan's problem. So there's that. Alrighty folks, it's time. We're finishing this book. Hi guys, I'm happy to report I have finished Golden Sun by Pierce Brown, and honestly, I'm happy to say overall, I enjoyed this book. Was it my favorite book I ever read? No. But was it definitely improvement from Red Rising? Yes. And will I be reading the 3rd book within this series? Also, yes. I think I've been pretty clear about my overall thoughts and feelings about this, you know, reading experience as I've gone along. But one thing I do want to say, especially now that I've read the end of this book be bananas, which is definitely in line to how Pierce Brown likes to structure his plots. He likes lots of sudden and quick reveals. And what I will say that goes alongside that, say what you will about maybe some of the predictability about his plots, or I would say some aspects of the story isn't necessarily the most original thing, but one thing I do appreciate is that his plots definitely have stakes in terms of who's gonna make it, who can you trust, what's going to happen. It's unclear, and I appreciate that there are at least stakes in terms of like who I feel like I can get attached to, because it definitely provides a level of unpredictability that makes you go, oh my goodness, and like continue to flip the pages. I feel like his ability to sort of keep you off kilter with some of his plotting decisions, and I think his strongest is his use of stakes in this, particularly because I feel like he's leaning on some beloved trope usage you find in sci-fi and fantasy, but I feel like he sort of turns some moments on their head by keeping things unpredictable and making you mourn because maybe you're losing some of your favorite characters in the book. And so for that, I do appreciate Pierce Brown's approach there, because it definitely sort of keeps you on the edge of your seat. I definitely feel like there can be a continued improvement, particularly with the characterization, with Darrow, but more so kind of making the side characters feel more whole and making me care more deeply about them, because I feel like if he's able to achieve that in combination with the stakes and plotting that he already has, I feel like the series could really grow to be incredibly impressive and unputdownable. Like if he can make me cry and flip the pages because the action scenes are really good, like then we've hit a home run. I don't feel like I'm there quite yet with this, but again, I do feel like the plot really shifted in book 2. I feel like he repivoted things from where he ended things at the end of book 1. I feel like has really pushed the story in a much more logical direction that makes more sense and is more impressive from a plot point of view. So for that, I also appreciate it, because I did not like book 1 at all, and I almost feel like he sort of cleared the board entirely and just kept some of the world building aspects and some of the relationships from book 1 and really brought us to a new direction starting with book 2, which I think was an overall improvement, which I like. I think at the end of the day, I would give this book like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. By no means a bad book, just wasn't quite the 5 out of 5 star read I feel like I've been hoping to get with every installment in this series, but I would recommend it now, now that I've seen the improvement from Red Rising, and I'm curious to see how I'm gonna feel about Morningstar in the future. So thank you so much for watching this vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.